Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Niglio.
And I'm Marnie Stockman, and this is the Lead It Like Lasso podcast, a Ted Lasso rewatch podcast. We are the authors of Lead It Like Lasso, a leadership book for life, your life.
And this podcast is an extension of many of the elements outlined in our book. We invite you to join us as we take a deep dive into each episode and explore the leadership principles that they play out in the series. And for today's episode, we're diving into season 3, episode 2, I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea. So, Marnie, as we talked about last time, there's some long episodes in
Yeah,
season 3 with lots of
meaty
content.
episodes. Yeah,
Yeah. So let's review some of the key things that were going on in this episode. Sound good?
yeah,
I'll start.
absolutely. Go ahead.
All right. First we learned that Trent, now the independent author, is he's commissioned or he's in there writing a book about AFC Richmond. And not only that, but we get kind of a backstory between the relationship in the past between him and Roy Kent.
Yeah, so that, of course, is one of my favorites, as they are two of my favorite characters, period. Also, Zava. This is the first we hear of a Zava. Felt like I should throw that in case folks forgot the reaction. Um, and Rebecca's take on how she handles that.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. And then we've got the Keeley angle. So we're continuing to see how KJPR is going, and we find out real quick that she's struggling a little bit with culture.
Yeah. And sad news for the whole internet that Roy and
Mhm.
Keeley broke up. So,
Yeah,
and how everyone is dealing with that.
yeah. And then we have Roy. Speaking of Roy from earlier, he goes back to Chelsea where he used to play and used
Yeah.
to star as a footballer. Hence the episode. And this really triggers some self reflection that we get some insights on as we end this episode. So where do you want to start with this episode when we start to pull out the leadership angles from what came across?
All right, so I'm literally looking at 4.5 pages of notes
We don't
from
have
this.
time for
So
four and a half
yeah,
pages of
we'll
notes.
keep it short. So I let's start with communication style.
Hmm.
Uh, you and I talk about the importance of telling folks how to communicate with you, giving a communication guide, right? If somebody has just started working with you, so they understand your style of communication. And in this episode, they showed that by lots of comments about different age groups. Case in point, step number one, Jamie goes to console Roy
Hmm.
about breaking up with Keeley. And Roy's like, "What are you doing?" And or what's that face? He's like, it's empathy, man. Like I forgot,
Yeah.
old man. And then Jamie goes to give him a hug. Oh, I forgot. Like you all are flinchy because of the war, right? So all this old man stuff. And then you find out, of course, Will is in there, right? The kit
Yep.
man listening. And again, you get that different generations and they're not even different generations. What in the real world are they, like 10 years apart, maybe?
Yep.
But they are showing you that different age groups, everybody has different communication style.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you said communication, absolutely. Something I thought about as I was watching this, and it reminded me very much of office corporate culture and really what do we call it the counter example, the master class in how not to communicate in a group setting. I thought it was hilarious when the locker room, they're all distraught for some reason, and Ted walks out and thinks it's because they heard of Zava. They
Yeah,
might be interested in signing Zava,
yeah,
and that was a surprise to everybody. And then, of course, they let him know that they're really talking about Roy and Keeley, and he almost faints. And then Roy walks in, and they disclose that Trent's actually going to write a book about the team. I just, we talk about how sometimes when communication not done well really can cause
yeah,
issues.
amplifies the problem or creates
Yeah,
new ones.
they gave us the perfect um, counterexample of what not to do in terms of uh, sharing information that probably needs to be delivered with a very well worded message of some sort.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I felt the same thing when Ted came out and they were all upset about something. He immediately jumped to, like, oh, is this about us getting Zava? That is not how, like,
Yeah.
even if it was, that's not how you message that.
Yep.
It's interesting. You know how when you hear a new word or you run across something you haven't heard in a long time, and then suddenly you see it lots of other places. This is coming up for me in the notion of, um, people say to show up as your authentic self, but the reality of it is you need to show up as your best authentic self in a work setting. And this is a case of best authentic communication. So Ted, for sure, if the Zava thing were true, right?
Yeah.
The best version of how to communicate that is not like, oh, what did you guys hear that Zava was coming? That's not his best take on that. It's not how he would have done it. So yes, you're right. That was the perfect counterexample of what not to do.
Yeah. And a reminder of a chat we had with Lorraine Lee, and author of Unforgettable Presence. But the best authentic version of yourself, body language matters. And if you don't remember that, you can ping your friend Isaac McAdoo, who is an excellent master,
Kinesis?
yeah, kinesis at the science of reading body language. But we've often talked about just the importance of first impressions, and
Yeah.
it's critical, right, that you put off the right body language. And Isaac was able to see in 2 seconds, of course it's a TV show, but there was something wrong with Roy and Keeley just
Yeah.
by looking at the body language.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That was brilliant. Yeah.
yeah.
So I hadn't even connected that with the notion of communication, but really all around. And people often ask us what is the most important element of
Mhm.
leadership. And we often say trust because that leads to communication. And with communication going badly, everything can break down. And I think this really is a good episode that represents that.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. All right, so is it is it my turn?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you want to
Okay.
talk about?
Well, I want to talk about something we have brought up once or twice before, which is don't take my kindness for weakness.
Oh, yeah, that's a statement that I have had to use out loud to grown-ups before. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and we often talk about Ted, and we speak to the fact that, all right, he is kind, he is empathetic, but he also knows when to draw the line and be
yeah, he knows
stern
his
with his
boundaries.
messaging. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I we say that all the time, and it's not so easy to bring up the specific examples of when he does that. And this episode I thought was perfect. How he dealt with Roy really disrupting an entire locker room, the
yeah,
entire team,
yeah,
by not allowing them to say anything at
to
all
Trent.
to Trent.
Yeah.
Um, and he had a great line. He wanted to squash the beef and start. I'm getting this wrong, but something around starting eating off the vegan
He said,
menu.
"Eat vegan." Yeah, and I thought that was
Yeah,
like, "Eat your veggies, do what's right for you," but I didn't realize it was the squash the beef, which is funny.
squash
That's good.
squash the beef. But do you have any? I mean, you I think between the two of us, I think it's pretty obvious you're kinder than I am, without a doubt.
That's
I
not
mean,
true.
what words of motivation and encouragement do you have to those people who really struggle to be that stern person in terms
When you
of
be.
when they need to be? Yeah,
Well, goodness knows we talk a ton about understanding who you are and knowing your core values being critically important. And I think when you know that, you can set boundaries where you then say, like, nope. And that is crossing the line. I mean, you and I both know we have a situation where somebody called and was yelling at me because I typically do respond kindly, right? And it was
yeah,
somebody we worked with. And my typical response to listen and respond was not working, and I actually yelled back. Um, To which my daughter was like texting her dad, going, "Dad, I don't know who mom's talking to, but this has gone ugly." And I wouldn't want to be the person on the other end. So don't like to have to do it often, but you do have to know where your boundaries are so that you draw the line in the sand for other folks. But one part that I thought was really important in the way Ted had that conversation with Roy. And remember, I was an educator, I was an administrator, so I often had to do classroom observations of other teachers. And many times I would see something I didn't agree with, and I had to call them out on it because goodness knows, instruction's not going to get better with proper feedback. So I think learning how to give proper feedback is a good way to still be kind, because as Brene Brown would say, clear is kind.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the models that I've read a good bit about is it's called SBI, which is situation, behavior, impact. So here's the situation, right? Like Roy, the locker room is a hot mess. Behavior, because your ego is in the way, right? And it's causing tensions to mount. Impact, we're going to lose a lot more than just this game to Chelsea, right? And then tied it together with the action that we need to have happen. But then what else did he do? This was about this situation, not about Roy as a human. And he said, Hallmark movies are like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they're terrible and great at the same time. So it was a still and I love you, Roy. But this situation, which your communication has impacted, needs to change. And I think when I think of don't take my kindness for weakness, I don't like it when I have to sort of get on my high horse and deal with it. I would like to get better about couching it as situation, behavior, and impact to be able to have that conversation honestly. How about you? You've watched me in more of those situations than I've thought about myself, or any situations that you remember from like your really, escalation in terms of leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has always been something, especially younger in my career, earlier in my career, that I struggled with because, as we know, I'm a people pleaser. It wasn't until I realized, and and I probably had a different phrase for it until Brene Brown
Yeah.
was, as you mentioned, clear as kind. But you come to the realization, and the the whole approach that, okay, I am consistently clear with expectations. I'm also consistently clear with an openness to listen and hear somebody else's perspective on things. I think, which is important. So when you have to be clear and to the point and direct, people will realize, okay, in other situations, they questioned me, they saw where I was coming from, but there comes a point where something so obvious like this with Roy and Trent, that Ted just had to do something about it. And I
Yeah.
think throughout the series, they have done a great job portraying Ted as someone who is very much open to somebody else's perspective
Yep.
and building the trust with people, that when he does deliver a stern message like, you need to squash this beef, Roy, it is accepted wholeheartedly and action is taken. So much
Well,
better than the compliment sandwich that some people use in terms
so
of
muit's better.
feedback, right?
And
Yeah.
and when I first came to the company that you worked for, you had already built the trust and that relationship with people. So when it's not like everybody listened. That was, I know those were probably one of the first things I said about you to you is like, oh, when you talk, people listen, because you had built that trust and
Yeah.
were wide open. And so yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah, and it does take a while. I think that is one of the issues of any leader that is new to a position.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do that right out of the gate because, in essence, you're relying on title only, and we know, and we've talked about, that
Yeah.
never works.
No.
You have to set some sort of track record and build that level of trust to get to that point.
Which actually leads to one of the other topics, which is how do you get to know folks? And what did Keeley want to do? Maybe have a picnic, right? Well, she wanted to go get some, well, I can never say the word right, Nasku,
Yeah,
and have some big wild shaman event. And Ted said, well, I was thinking escape room.
yeah.
Okay, well, you do you. But having that time outside of the official work to build that relationship and trust is important.
Oh, I mean, clearly, and again, they presented that so well. You can tell just that office environment was very sterile. Nobody
Yeah.
was talking to each other. Nobody was having fun. The interaction between the coworkers was almost non-existent, and obviously, the interaction between Barbara and Keeley was strained at
Tense.
best.
Yes.
All business versus all fun. There
Yeah.
was some sort
Yeah.
of compromise that needs to happen here. And to kind of bring it back, don't take my kindness for weakness. Ted demonstrated that really well, but Keeley did as well.
Yep.
Barbara really was rude to
Inappropriate
Shandy,
with Shandy. Yeah. Yeah.
inappropriate. And Keeley dealt with it right away by being direct and being clear that in essence was not acceptable. But taking the advice from Ted earlier, she noticed the snow globes and she
Yep.
started to build that
Yep.
connection. It was not outside of work, but it wasn't work related.
Yep.
And how important is that in developing a network of people and a culture that is one that could potentially lead to thriving.
And that was the brilliant baby step because it was clear Barbara wasn't going to go on a picnic with Keeley. So to connect in her space. The other part that was brilliant for both Ted and Keeley, well done, writers again, is Ted took Roy in another room. Roy took Trent in another room. Keeley went in another room. You don't have those conversations in the crowd, in the public. You have critical conversations, critical feedback, one on one, all of the time, even if you need to give it a beat and change rooms.
Yeah, and let's segue. You know the types of people that have those conversations in public. It's people with
Bullies?
egos.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
egos.
yeah.
They want
Rupert
they
Manning?
want other people to know that
Yep.
that they are the boss or they are the best. So my weak attempt at a segue is Zava
Ah,
and
Zava.
the
Yeah,
ego
the
of
Zava.
Zava.
Yeah, yeah.
So I got to thinking because I'm guessing this maybe doesn't happen as much in education, but in every technology and development group I've always been part of, there always seems to be this one rock star, brilliant engineer who has just a massive ego. And the challenges of that from a business perspective, it's typically been one of the greatest challenges I've ever had in teams that I've worked on, because ego was the opposite of the culture that
The
I always
company.
wanted to build.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious. Did you run into that much in education or your experience in other
I mean,
industries that you've worked in?
typically in teaching, first teachers have that emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, that it doesn't play out that way. I have run into an administrator or two where it was a challenge because of the ego, for sure. But I more saw that diva attitude um, more amongst in the software space when
yeah,
somebody felt like they were the star player, um, and that can create a toxic culture because I mean it's just dangerous to a team if you don't corral that in. And we've definitely talked about that from a personnel perspective. You have a really good performer but they're killing the team. And frankly, I feel like I just listened to Gary Vee do a talk about you've got to fire that person because culture is everything. And if you let that ego run the team, it's going to be harmful. And I think that's what Jamie's hinting at the end of the show, where they said they got Ziva, and he said the fans aren't going to like that. Now, May's
Yeah.
bar is going bananas
Yeah.
because they just see the striker. But I think Jamie sees like, we had these problems with me. He recognizes the parts of him that were what he sees as Zava. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, I agree. And let's give Jamie a nod. If we were to give out MVPs in terms of personal development for
Yeah,
each episode, Jamie took a huge step forward. Clearly, he, with his empathetic reaction to Roy and
yeah,
Keeley,
yeah.
number one. But number two, just exactly like you said, he is the one who sees, rightly so, exactly as you said, because he was once that person. But the fact that the ego of Zava is going to kill, presumably, the team
The
dynamics
culture. Yeah,
that has been built up significantly since the middle of season two. You can tell they're in a great spot in terms of locker room chemistry at this
yeah,
point.
yeah.
And Jamie's the one, not Ted, not Beard, not anybody else. Jamie is the one who
That
recognizes
recognizes.
that there's a risk here in terms of team dynamics.
So it's funny you say that the locker room dynamics because at halftime, right after the Roy Trent bit, and they want Jamie's idea on what they need to do. Jamie starts the idea. Hey, when we're running past the middle, Sam picks up flawlessly from there and says, yeah, when we get the ball, we need to keep dribbling. And Isaac finishes it. So they are a cohesive unit. And if somebody gets in the middle of that, that will be trouble.
Yeah. It feels like that's about to happen.
Yes, it does. You know what?
Yeah.
My last comment that I've written down is Jamie is the only one who has done all the work for himself. And he's got now the right kind of confidence. You and I talk a lot about you have to know the authentic version of you to be confident. And that's how you show up as your true self. And we can see Jamie's done the work.
Yeah. Was that the last? We have anything else? Or are we good?
Last. Yeah.
All right. Well, then that is our whistle. So game's over, but the leadership lessons keep on playing.
Yeah, they do. So if you like this, please be sure to subscribe. Follow us everywhere. Like Roy, here, there, and everywhere on social. We're at Lead It Like Lasso. And of course, you can find us at leaditlikelasso.com. And we'd love for you to check out our snarky sidekick of a newsletter, workinprogress.ai.
Absolutely. So until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep leading it like Lasso. Thanks, everybody.